Most people visit Brooklyn just to walk across the bridge, take that DUMBO photo, and leave. But that's barely the beginning. Brooklyn is where New York keeps changing block by block, from creative warehouses and beautiful brownstone streets to incredible food, local culture, and neighborhoods full of personality. So, today we're going beyond the postcard view and spending one day exploring the real Brooklyn. Let's get started. Day 1. Exploring Brooklyn's most iconic neighborhoods. Morning. Brooklyn Bridge. Brooklyn deserves its own day, and there's no better place to begin than the Brooklyn Bridge. Since I had a full day of exploring ahead, I made my way here around 9 a.m. before the bridge turned into a long line of people stopping to take photos. I'd seen the Brooklyn Bridge in movies, photos, and travel guides for years, but standing underneath those towers is a completely different experience. The stone towers feel enormous once you're standing underneath them, and before long, you realize you're looking up at the bridge itself just as much as you're looking out over the skyline. The bridge opened in 1883, and despite it being one of New York's most famous landmarks, it still feels like a working part of the city. Runners pass by, cyclists head across the river, commuters make their way to work, and visitors stop every few steps trying to fit the towers, cables, and skylines into a single photo. The crossing itself is about 1.1 miles or 1.8 kilometers, and I planned to be on the Brooklyn side pretty quickly. Instead, it took me around 40 minutes. Every few minutes, there seemed to be another view worth stopping for, whether it was Lower Manhattan behind me, the East River below, or the bridge stretching overhead. Insider tip. One thing I noticed pretty quickly is how easy it is to get distracted while taking photos. More than once, I saw cyclists ringing their bells at people who accidentally wandered too close to the bike lane. If you're planning to stop often, stay on the pedestrian side of the walkway and keep an eye on what's happening around you. DUMBO. The moment I stepped off the Brooklyn Bridge, I was in DUMBO, short for Down Under the Manhattan Bridge Overpass. Like most people, I headed straight for Washington Street first. This is the spot you've probably seen all over social media where the Manhattan Bridge fills the street and the Empire State Building sits perfectly framed underneath it. The funny thing is, the photo itself only took a minute. Getting there, waiting for a gap in the crowd, and watching everyone else trying to get the same exact shot took much longer. Once I left Washington Street behind, DUMBO became far more interesting. Old brick warehouses line the streets, but instead of factories, they're now home to cafes, restaurants, boutiques, and creative studios. I wasn't really following a route here. I just wandered around for a while, turning down side streets and stopping whenever something caught my attention. A lot of the morning ended up being exactly that, walking around without much of a plan and seeing where the neighborhood took me. Eventually, I found my way down the waterfront. Ferries were moving back and forth across the East River, people were sitting along the shoreline, and Manhattan stretched across the opposite side of the water. I stayed here much longer than I intended to, and judging by the number of people, I wasn't the only one. Before leaving the area, I stopped by Jane's Carousel, a beautifully restored carousel from 1922 sitting inside a glass pavilion right beside the river. Kids were riding, parents were taking photos, and through the glass walls you could see the skyline rising behind it. It's not something you come across very often in New York. Insider tip. Washington Street gets almost all the attention, but I spent far more time around the waterfront than I did taking photos of the bridge. After getting the famous shot, keep walking. Some of the best views in DUMBO aren't on Instagram, they're along the river. Brunch at Timeout Market. After wandering around DUMBO for a while, I stopped at Timeout Market for brunch. It's inside the old Empire Stores building and works more like a food hall than a restaurant. So, instead of choosing one menu, you can pick from dozens of different vendors. I grabbed a classic New York bagel from Essa Bagel, although there are plenty of other options here, from pancakes at Clinton Street Baking Company to burgers from Pat LaFrida and fried chicken from Jacob's Pickles. Most brunch dishes fall somewhere between $10 and $25. Once I had my food, I headed up to the rooftop. The view alone is worth coming up here for. On one side, you can look back toward the Brooklyn Bridge you just crossed, while Manhattan fills the skyline across the river. Insider tip: seating fills up quickly around brunch, especially on the rooftop. If every table upstairs is taken, check the indoor seating by the windows before wandering around with a tray looking for a spot. Late morning, Brooklyn Bridge Park. The waterfront continues straight into Brooklyn Bridge Park, so after spending the morning around DUMBO, I simply kept walking along the river. Pebble Beach was one place I had specifically noted before coming here. It's a small rocky shoreline tucked underneath the Manhattan Bridge and one of the most photographed corners of the park. The bridge towers above the shoreline, boats pass through the river below, and Lower Manhattan fills the view across the river. Brooklyn Bridge Park occupies a series of former industrial piers that have been transformed into public spaces, spanning over 1.3 miles. The park is broken up into distinct piers, each offering something different. Some sections are lined with lawns and benches, others have playgrounds, sports courts, and open waterfront paths. For a quick break, Pier 1 offers the most expansive grassy hills, while Pier 2 is fully dedicated to active sports. You can even find a salvaged 1920s carousel, Jane's Carousel, enclosed in a jewel box glass pavilion right on the water. Walking through the park, there was always something happening, whether it was families having a picnic, people stretched out on the grass, or couples sitting by the water looking toward Manhattan. A lot of New York's famous views come from observation decks. Here, the skyline is simply part of the park. Afternoon, Brooklyn Heights. My first stop in Brooklyn Heights was the Brooklyn Heights Promenade, a raised walkway overlooking Lower Manhattan, New York Harbor, the Brooklyn Bridge, and the Statue of Liberty in the distance. To get up here from the park, you can take the Squibb Park Bridge, a pedestrian footbridge that connects the waterfront directly to the heart of the neighborhood. The promenade gets plenty of attention, but I ended up spending just as much time in the neighborhood behind it. Brooklyn Heights became New York City's first historic district in 1965, and block after block is lined with brownstones, churches, and old residential buildings that have been preserved for decades. The architecture here is incredibly diverse, showcasing perfectly intact Federal, Gothic Revival, and Italianate styles from the 19th century. Unlike DUMBO, there isn't a famous photo spot, museum, or landmark pulling everyone in the same direction. The neighborhood itself is the reason people come here. A lot of the streets looked exactly like the Brooklyn many people imagine before visiting New York for the first time. Insider tip: don't turn around after reaching the promenade. The waterfront view is only part of Brooklyn Heights. Some of the most interesting streets are a few blocks inland, away from the crowds gathering along the railing. Make sure to wander down Montauk Street for local cafes, or head over to Cranberry and Willow Streets to see some of the oldest, most picturesque residential blocks in the city. New York Transit Museum. Trading the open city streets for the first indoor exploration of the day, I headed underground to check out the New York Transit Museum in downtown Brooklyn. The coolest part about this place is the setup. It's entirely built inside an actual decommissioned 1930s subway station that got shut down back in 1946. You literally walk down the stairs from the street level, just like you're catching a regular train, except you emerge onto a vintage platform lined with over 20 historic subway cars. The cars are completely open, so I spent my time jumping from train to train, walking through a literal timeline of the city. You get to sit on old-school woven wicker seats, handle the heavy metal ceiling straps, and check out how drastically the route maps and light bulbs changed over the decades. It's wild to stand inside a car from over a century ago and realize you're occupying the same space where millions of early-generation New Yorkers used to cram into on their morning commutes. My favorite detail by far was looking at the original advertisements still hanging above the windows. They left up all these old cigarette campaigns, long-forgotten cleaning products, and public notices with prices from another era that are genuinely hilarious to read. Admission is just $10, but keep an eye on the clock because they close up pretty early at 4 p.m. Late afternoon, Brooklyn Botanic Garden. I had the Brooklyn Botanic Garden circled in my itinerary all day, and it completely lived up to the anticipation. You step off the pavement and drop right into 52 acres of thick, mature canopy that's been growing here next to Prospect Park since 1910. My main goal was the Japanese Hill and Pond Garden, which is the oldest public Japanese-style garden in the country. The design is incredible. It's engineered around a central winding pond with a wooden Shinto shrine rising straight out of the water. As you trace the shoreline, you walk along narrow dirt paths that lead to hand-carved stone lanterns, wooden bridges, and floating wooden docks where dozens of massive orange koi fish swarm the surface. There are even logs where turtles line up to catch the last bits of the remaining sunlight. Every single turn on the trail alters the landscape, framing the central pond through weeping willows or hillsides covered in Japanese maples. I ended up filling my camera roll with photos, just trying to capture the shrine from different angles along the path. Right next to it is the Cherry Esplanade. In the spring, this spot turns into a massive, thick canopy of pink blossoms, but even on a regular afternoon, it's just this giant, manicured green runway lined with rows of perfectly spaced trees. Tickets are $22 at the gate. The garden locks up at 6 p.m. on Wednesdays, Fridays, and weekends, but they keep the gates open until 8:30 p.m. on Tuesdays and Thursdays. Just keep in mind, they're totally closed on Mondays. Insider tip. If you imagined this as a perfect picnic spot or a place to lie out and relax on a blanket, you'll want to adjust your plans. The garden is strictly a no picnicking zone, meaning no blankets, lawn chairs, or outside food are allowed on the grass, and staff will actively ask you to unpack. You can absolutely sit directly on the grass at the Esplanade to enjoy the view, but save the full lounge setup for Prospect Park right next door. Evening, dinner at Olmsted. I specifically aimed for Vanderbilt Avenue because I wanted to see if Greg Backstrom's background at Per Se actually translated into a relaxed neighborhood joint. The space is tight and gets loud quickly, with people crammed around a 12-seat central bar right next to an open kitchen line. The menu is built entirely around seasonal small plates, so I ordered their kale crab rangoon with their famous carrot crepe. The rangoon comes out fried crispy with a sweet and sour dipping sauce, but the crepe is the real standout. It's a soft, bright orange wrapper loaded with little neck clams and sunflower seeds, hitting a very specific balance of sweet root vegetable and briny seafood. To finish it off, I got a side of their warm house bread to clean the leftover sauce from the plate. Most items on the list stay under $24, which gets you high-level technical discipline without the usual 3-digit tasting menu bill. Useful info for spending a day in Brooklyn. Best time to visit Brooklyn. I absolutely love exploring Brooklyn in May and October. The daytime weather stays between 65 to 72 degrees Fahrenheit, which is 18 to 22 degrees Celsius, so you can easily wander through the blooming Botanic Garden or catch crystal clear skyline views from the bridge without breaking a sweat. July and August get incredibly sticky and heavy with humidity. The concrete waterfront at Brooklyn Bridge Park has almost zero shade, meaning the intense midday sun will quickly drain your energy. Winter brings a totally different vibe. December is magical if you want to see the wild, over-the-top Christmas lights in Diker Heights, or skate right under the bridge, but the bitter river winds mean you'll want to trade the long outdoor walks for cozy local restaurants and a morning inside the Transit Museum. Airport tips. When I'm heading straight to Brooklyn, JFK and LaGuardia are always my go-to options. JFK connects directly into the local transit grid, while LaGuardia keeps you much closer to northern neighborhoods like Williamsburg. I usually count on a cab from LaGuardia taking about 30 to 50 minutes, costing between $40 and $65. From JFK, I prefer skipping the $60 to $85 taxi fare entirely by jumping on the air train and switching to the subway. It gets you there in about an hour for just $11. Newark works too if you want a killer flight deal, though I'd only choose it if the savings justify the extra time it takes to cross 2 rivers. Whatever you do, skip the rental car entirely. I can tell you from experience that finding parking here is a nightmare. Garages charge a fortune, and the subway or your own 2 feet will get you everywhere in this guide way faster than sitting in gridlock traffic. Where to stay? You don't need to stress about finding the perfect hidden spot to make this Brooklyn trip work. When I want a killer deal, I stay in downtown Brooklyn. It's a massive transit hub where I snap up reliable hotel chains for around $150 to $250 a night. If you want a neighborhood that's bursting with energy and an incredible nightlife scene to dive into after dark, Williamsburg is a total blast. I've crashed at budget-friendly setups there, like the Pod Hotel for around $150, but you can also splurge on their trendy boutique spots that jump to $350. For something really special, I absolutely loved DUMBO and Brooklyn Heights. DUMBO puts you right on the waterfront with those jaw-dropping bridge views, though the high-end luxury spots there can easily clear $500 a night. Right next door is Brooklyn Heights, which gives you this gorgeous, quiet brownstone vibe, and classic stays run between $250 and $400. Aim for either DUMBO or Heights if your budget allows. Waking up there means you can start your morning wandering straight out on foot without dealing with a crowded subway morning rush. How to get around? One thing I love about exploring Brooklyn is how effortlessly different neighborhoods blend together. Places like DUMBO, Brooklyn Heights, and downtown Brooklyn naturally flow right into one another, so I spend almost my entire day walking rather than stressing over directions. When you need to cover a longer distance, jumping on the subway is incredibly easy. A single ride costs exactly $3, and you don't even need to buy a card. I just tap my phone right at the turnstile. There's also a weekly fare cap, meaning once you hit 12 rides using the same phone, every single subway ride after that is completely free for the rest of the week. Stations are scattered everywhere, making it a breeze to hop over to Williamsburg or head to your next stop whenever you feel ready. As I mentioned earlier, just skip the car entirely. Walking in the subway easily cover the whole guide without the traffic gridlock or parking headaches. Where to eat? Brooklyn's neighborhoods each have a completely distinct food identity, so you end up finding entirely different setups just by crossing the street. If you want an old-school Brooklyn institution, hunt down noodle pudding in Brooklyn Heights. There's no sign on the door and it's strictly cash only, but the plates of homemade pasta keep the tables full. It skips the typical social media crowd entirely, giving you a neighborhood vibe where dinner runs about $30 to $50 a person. For a completely different flavor, head to Gertrude's in Prospect Heights. It's a neighborhood bistro that serves up twists on New York's Jewish comfort food. I usually grab the burger served Reuben's style on a challah roll or the crispy potato latkes topped with trout roe. Depending on how many small plates you order, you're looking at about $40 to $65 a person. To finish with something unique, book a table at Sofre. It's an upscale Persian spot that elevates traditional flavors using ingredients like saffron rice and plum braised chicken. The interior is minimal and sleek. Once you add up the mains and appetizers, the bill lands closer to $70 to $100 a person. A full day is all it takes to hit Brooklyn's absolute best neighborhoods, walk across the bridge, hang out along the waterfront, and discover some incredible local spots. If this guide helped you plan your own trip, hit like and subscribe for more travel itineraries. And if you have more than a day in New York, check out my ultimate New York bucket list right here.